It's July 1956. Marilyn Monroe arrived in London on honeymoon with her new husband, Arthur Miller. She was to make The Prince and the Showgirl with Sir Laurence Olivier. It was meant to be a happy time. But when filming began, all did not go as hoped. Over time, Marilyn grew to hate Olivier, and the feeling was mutual. Coming up next on Lights Camera, author Michelle Morgan talks about her new book, When Marilyn Met the Queen. So, Michelle Morgan, your new book is called When Marilyn Met the Queen. And this is the story. It's not just about the meeting of the Queen. It's about Marilyn's time in London, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, really, the Queen has a walk-on role in the actual book, because the book is about the 4 months that Marilyn spent here, and there's a little bit about before and there's a little bit after, but mainly it's about the actual 4 months that she was here and the making of The Prince and the Showgirl and how she got on with Laurence Olivier and all that stuff. So it covers quite a lot of information.
Exactly, and I didn't realize until recently, Marilyn and the Queen are the same age.
Yes, they
or
are.
Would be the same age if Marilyn was still with us.
Yeah, that's right. They're just a couple of months apart.
Yes. Now, like you said, it's the story of the making of The Prince and the Showgirl, and it actually starts even before Marilyn leaves for London, because she had announced her engagement to Arthur Miller, which was a shock to everybody. And then they got a quickie marriage, and then flew over to London. So take us from the time, I guess, from the time that they announced their engagement to when they were leaving for London.
Well, it did seem to be quite a rushed thing. Arthur Miller was being interviewed outside the courthouse because he was, there was all the Un-American Activities Committee, all that stuff going on. And so reporters had said to him, why do you need your passport back? And he basically said, well, I'm going to London with the woman who will be my wife. And of course, all the reporters had heard all the rumors. So they said, well, who's that going to be? Is it going to be Marilyn Monroe? And he said, yes, of course, that's true. So then they called a press conference to announce it officially. And I mean, the paparazzi were just everywhere by that point. So they basically had to wait until the paparazzi went home, and they sneaked out of their house and had their civil ceremony. And then a couple of days later, they had their the actual Jewish ceremony. And then very shortly after, just a couple of weeks after, they flew off to London. So it all happened quite quickly.
Yeah, and then when they got over to London, didn't they have another ceremony?
No,
I thought they did for some reason. I thought they had another ceremony to be married. But Prince and the Showgirl, this was the first movie which was all Marilyn's production company. She was the one who got it from the stage to the film. Did she want Laurence Olivier as the lead in that movie?
Well, her film production company bought the rights to Sleeping Prince from Terence Rattigan. And she did want Laurence Olivier as an actor. She wasn't so sure about him as a director, but he wanted to direct it as well. And, in the end, they just went along with that. His production company was also involved with it. I mean, him and Terence Rattigan rewrote the script to become The Prince and the Showgirl. And he was very much the boss on set, to such a point that many of the people that I spoke to said that at the time they didn't even realize that it was Marilyn Monroe Productions, because Laurence Olivier was the boss, and his production company was involved as well, and they didn't think that Marilyn had anything other to do than act. And they were quite surprised later on when it was released and it said Marilyn Monroe Productions. They didn't really know much about it. Quite a few people told me that.
Yeah, and you mentioned how Laurence Olivier was the boss. And I got the feeling also that Marilyn thought she may have been the boss also, because they kind of bumped heads pretty regularly.
Well, they did, yes. I mean, the problem started when it was going to be rehearsals, and Marilyn wasn't a huge fan of rehearsals anyway, and she went into them. And the thing was that many of the people that were involved in the production had also been involved either with the Sleeping Prince play or with other films and plays that Laurence Olivier had done. So they all knew each other. They were all kind of a family. And he introduced Marilyn in what she considered to be a patronizing way, talking about how her method of acting was going to be very different to their style of acting, and that it would take a little while for everybody to settle down. And she just thought that that was a bit patronizing. And so from that moment on, she was kind of questioning, you know, where this was going. And after that, everything that happened on the set, you know, if he said something that she didn't like, then they definitely bumped heads. And he became frustrated too because of her timekeeping. And, you know, there was many times when she was late. Very, very rarely was she ever on time. I mean, I don't think that there was ever a time when, you know, she walked on the set when she was supposed to and stayed there for the entire day and everyone was great. I mean, even when she was on time, sometimes, you know, she would be walking off at some point and refusing to come back, and it was just all a bit of a shambles. You know, if you're standing waiting around in your costumes and wondering when you're going to get home in the evening, or when you're even going to start work in the morning, it can be very frustrating. So it's frustrating for everybody, but particularly it seems for Laurence Olivier.
Yeah, and excuse me, he was he also was he keeping a I was reading on the Internet Movie Database, was he keeping a book about how many takes Marilyn Monroe would have to take for a certain scene?
Well, there was certainly a lot of notes taken in that production. I had access to the Laurence Olivier files, and there was one particular document which was really invaluable to me, but I can't believe that they actually did it. It was a document about how many times Marilyn was late, what time she came on the set, how many times she walked off, all those things. It counted up all of the minutes. It would be like, Marilyn late by 43 minutes. It was always, to the precise minute. And time held up on set, 23 minutes. It was just amazing that there was somebody actually there noting down to the precise minute how late Marilyn was and when she was holding things up on set. So there was a lot of notes being taken about her. And so I'm not surprised that she was frustrated on the set, because, it's not nice to think that people are watching you and writing down on their clipboards, notes about you. That's not nice.
Especially since it was her production company, they were not going to fire her. I mean, she was in charge of the production. So, I mean, that kind of seemed like a fruitless gesture there. But let's be honest, though, Marilyn had several issues going on during the filming of that movie, or during her time in London. I mean, she was on medication. Her weight kept fluctuating. She suffered a miscarriage while she was over in London.
That's questionable.
Is that questionable?
Yes. She had gynecological issues for sure. I've seen the doctor's invoice. Not one invoice that I've seen said that she had a miscarriage. And also when she went back to America, she saw a doctor, I think it was a year or two later, and his records have come to light since then, and it notes various things that went on in London, and then it notes a miscarriage in 1957. It doesn't note a miscarriage in 1956. So my feeling is that she was suffering from endometriosis, which she had suffered from for her entire adult life, and she was definitely seen to by gynecologists in London, and they came to Parkside House where she was living to examine her. But there's no evidence, there's no concrete evidence that she was actually pregnant while she was making the film.
But also in your book, you were talking about how Marilyn's used to hotel rooms, small rooms, even though in nice hotels. But in London, she was in a cottage, I guess you would call it, or a mansion, to be a better term for it. And that did not sit well with her, did it?
Now, was she expected a little cottage with, roses around the door and a little picket fence, that kind of, English thatched roof kind of chocolate box thing? And she didn't get it. She got a big mansion that came with a team of staff. They all, some of them lived on the grounds, and there was lots of people in and out all of the time. And it was just a bit of a shock to her, I think. And the fact as well that there was press all around. It was a private place in that there was a driveway and there was a gate, but the press were able to scale the gate and get through the bushes and all those kind of things. And they would often be found wandering in the gardens, or even at one point, two journalists actually scaled up onto the roof and dangled over to try and get a picture of Marilyn in her bedroom. Uh-huh. So it was crazy. It wasn't a very private place, really. I mean, I'm sure if whoever lives there now, it's very private, but when you're a superstar and everybody wants to see you, there was definitely ways that they could get onto the property without being noticed for a little while at least.
It sounds like what Princess Diana went through with the paparazzi.
Yes, it's quite similar, actually.
Yeah. Now she, like you say in your book, the book is called When Marilyn Met the Queen. Tell me a little bit about how that meeting came about.
That's the cover, by the way.
It is. That's
the American cover. Well, Marilyn desperately wanted to meet the Queen. I mean, from the moment she arrived, she was quite fascinated by her. And one of her assistants was always asked, what's the best place to shop to buy gloves like the Queen, or perfume like the Queen, all this kind of thing. So she was quite fascinated by her. And then she decided that she would really like to meet the Queen, and that she wanted to go to Buckingham Palace and have tea and that kind of thing. And so one of the publicists found it on his to-do list, and he presented it to Laurence Olivier, who quickly scrubbed it off and said, absolutely not, this isn't happening. He knew the royals, I think that he thought he was one of the royals, in all honesty. But there was no way that he wanted the meeting to happen. However, there was going to be a Royal Command performance in October, and the people around the Queen who were organising this, they thought that Marilyn was an ideal choice of celebrity to meet the Queen, and that's how it happened. So it was one cold autumn night in October in London, in the Empire Theatre in Leicester Square, and Marilyn was there. A host of other celebrities were there too, and the Queen came, and she everyone lined up. She came up the line and met Marilyn, and they talked about being neighbours, because the Queen lived in Windsor and Marilyn lived in Englefield Green, which is right next to it. So they chatted about that, and Marilyn told her about her bike rides in the park, and all, it was just a very sweet conversation. And afterwards, Marilyn said that the Queen was very sweet and she really liked her. And when she was going home, she actually said that the two highlights of the trip were meeting the Queen and going to see Arthur Miller's play. So that was the nicer things about being in London for Marilyn. She didn't mention the highlight of the trip being the making of the film. She just liked meeting meeting the Queen and the Arthur Miller play.
Now, you said you talked to a lot of people involved in the movie. I didn't realize. I mean, this movie was made. Quick math here: 56. That was 66 years ago.
Yes.
Were there a lot of people still surviving from that film? Well,
this is the thing. This book was the first book that I ever wanted to write. When I was 22 years old, 30 years ago, it was the first book I ever wanted to write, because I was a Marilyn fan. I was a British Marilyn fan. Marilyn came to Britain, so therefore I wanted to find out more about it. It didn't happen at the time. Nobody wanted to publish it at the time. But over the years, I just kept on doing my research and kept on interviewing people. So a lot of the people in the book were interviewed back in 1992, and then again in 1995, and then a little bit later, and then now 2020, I think was the last, or 2021 was the last people that I interviewed. And so obviously many of the people that I interviewed have gone, very sadly. But when I was researching in 2020, there were some people still left, including Jerry Giroux, who was the publicist. And unfortunately, he's since passed away, but he told me some really good stories for the book. I spoke to him for a long time. He was a real character. So that's been the greatest thing about this book, that if I'd started it in 2020, I wouldn't have had all these people that I had interviewed. It was just because I started it actually in 1992 that I did have all these different interviews that I'd already done with people who very sadly now gone, but you know, now their memories are alive and their memories can inform people for years to come, which is a lovely thing.
Is there a story that surprised you about this, about when you were doing your research?
There were so many stories, but I think particularly the fact that the way that Britain reacted to Marilyn being here, like just everything was like Marilyn crazy. You know, they had like Marilyn lookalike competitions, Marilyn dance competitions. Everyone wanted Marilyn to come and open their supermarket or their nightclub or their garden party or whatever it was. Everybody wanted something to do with Marilyn. And I uncovered so many stories of Marilyn being mentioned, like in the House of Commons, being mentioned by councillors. Like there was one councillor who wanted Marilyn to advertise British beef. It was just like, it was a really strange thing. But you know, I imagined like all these people sort of in a meeting and him standing up and going, "Excuse me, I've got an idea." You know, it's just like really funny things like that. And then there was a story about two girls who were fighting in the street, and they were taken to court because one of them said that the other one dressed like Marilyn or walked like Marilyn or something, and they got into a fight, and it was just like the craziest thing. But that's what I really liked about this. I mean, obviously I loved researching all the Marilyn stuff. I loved finding out how she affected everybody else, from the people who met her in Englefield Green where she lived, to the people who never ever met her but dreamed about meeting her. And it was just, you know, it was a complete honor to write this book, and I just absolutely loved every single little minute of it.
How did you get into, I know this is your third Marilyn book that you've talked about on this show. How did you get interested in Marilyn Monroe?
Well, it was back in 1985, and I was a huge Madonna fan, and of course she did the Material Girl video where she wore Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend dress, and it was all sort of Marilyn related. And so Marilyn was on my radar. I knew Marilyn obviously because everybody knows Marilyn, but she sort of became on my radar at that point. And then I saw a Marilyn film, River of No Return. I watched that film and thought it was quite good. And then we went on holiday. I was 15, and it was me and my mum and dad and my brother, and we went on holiday. And I saw a postcard of her, and it was a postcard of her blowing a kiss to the camera and with a gold dress on. And I said to my dad, I think I'm going to buy a Marilyn book to read on the beach because I think that she's quite interesting. So I bought a Marilyn book to read on the beach, and in fact, it's right here. This is the very book that I bought, and it still actually has my homemade bookmark in it, which says Marilyn on it.
Oh, wow.
So I bought this book and took it to the beach, and as soon as I started reading it, that was it. I was completely hooked. I couldn't believe that that such a woman ever existed. She was just such an inspiration to me. And I remember going into a shop. This was when we were still on holiday, and there was a huge postcard collection about Marilyn, lots of different pictures. And I bought every single postcard and picture. And I remember my mum saying to me, you know, just be careful that you're not spending all your holiday money on, you know, on a whim. And little did she know, and little did I know that, you know, what was going to happen after that. Because it was just immediate. As soon as I started reading that book, it was just immediate love. I can't describe it.
There was recent documentary here in the States on the network HBO, which talked about which was Marilyn based, but what I learned from that was that, and I'm learning from your book also, is that she was very active in controlling her own image.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not realize how much she worked to maintain that. And it sounds like in the book she was doing that also, at the movie The Prince and the Showgirl, because she wanted to look a certain way and she wanted the film to look a certain way. So she was involved in all aspects, wasn't she?
Yes, she was. And I mean, that caused a bit of a problem as well, because one of the publicists showed her a picture that they had released from the set of Laurence Olivier directing her, and they released it to the press. And he showed her the picture in the press, and she was like, who told you that you could put this picture out? Because she didn't like it. And he was like, oh, I thought you already knew, and sort of backed off. And he was instructed after that to not show her any pictures before they went out, which I think is very wrong. She should have had an active part in it. But after that, she used to get her people to go through any publicity pictures that she saw on the set and approve or disapprove. The ones that she didn't like, they would score out. And so yeah, she wanted to be seen in a certain way, and who can blame her? I mean, she was very insecure at times. There was times when she was on the set and she thought that she had a little tummy, which is crazy to me because she's just perfect when I look at her. But she would get the cameraman to shout out a code word for her so that she remembered to suck her tummy in and things like that. So she was quite insecure about how she looked, which is astounding to me because she always looks wonderful as far as I can see.
I mean, what's your next book going to be about?
I don't know. I mean, I'm just about to start working on another novel. I've got a few books coming out for, well, I'm not allowed to really speak about them, but little mini projects that are coming out in the next year or two. And I mean, I never say never to writing about Marilyn. And I've been really lucky that so many publishers have asked me to write about Marilyn over the years. And so if a good project comes my way that's Marilyn related, then I would absolutely say yes. But I've got no plans of my own to write any Marilyn books at this point, but never say never, because she's my happy place and I love writing about her. It's a complete joy.
Well, I tell you, Michelle, it's been fun talking to you again. The book is called When Marilyn Met the Queen, and it's about, there it is.
And this is the UK cover as well. So we've got two different ones. This is the American. Okay.
You have an American and UK version. Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Cool.
So why was the difference in covers, or is that normal?
Well, because it's two different publishers.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So it was published by Robinson Little Brown in the UK and by Pegasus in America.
I see. Okay. Well, I tell you what, Michelle, I appreciate you taking time again to be on Lights Camera Author, and I hope we can talk again pretty soon.
I hope that too. It's been great. Thank you.
All right, thank you.